Good evening to one and all. And first and foremost, I would like to invite Dr. Avinash Madhale for the webinar. And as all of you are aware, this webinar is part of Design Challenge, where Purnaiha Nala in Mysuru is looked at from various perspectives, but mainly as the ecological spine for Mysuru city in answer to the climate resilience building of tier 2 cities, I could say that. And today I would like to welcome all the participants and also acknowledge this particular design challenge has come with through three organizations: Mysuru School of Architecture, Mysuru Water Forum, and Aranya Outreach. And this was supported by Bengaluru Sustainability Forum. And for this competition, the knowledge partners are Council of Architecture and IUDI, that is Indian Institute of Urban Designers, Karnataka chapter, and Mysuru School of Design. I would like to acknowledge Trivikram, architect Trivikram, who is the chairperson of IUDI Karnataka chapter, and all the other members who are there. Yes, I can't see all the names here. That's why I'm only taking one person, and many participants also are there with us. May I kindly request Architect Lakshmi to introduce Dr. Avinash, please.
Thank you, ma'am. Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to welcome our speaker for today, Dr. Avinash Madhale. Dr. Madhale is the Program Director of Urban Programs at the Center for Environment Education, with over 20 years of experience in sustainable development, urban governance, and environmental education. He holds a PhD from the University of Pune on politics of participation, along with a master's degree in political science. Dr. Madhale's work focuses on participatory democracy, multi-stakeholder dialogues, and community engagement, particularly in the context of climate resilience and equity. His experience spans initiatives such as participatory budgeting in Pune and the Transforming MWAT project with the Tata Institute of Social Sciences, as well as work on sustainable urban mobility, informal economics, including street vendors and waste pickers, and issues of water and sanitation. He also contributes to environmental education in schools, aligned with Education for Sustainable Development, and works closely with municipal bodies, facilitating citizen government collaborators, designing educational tools, and providing technical inputs with a strong emphasis on justice and local knowledge. Based between Pune and Mumbai, he is an active contributor to India's Urban Sustainability Network. We are really looking forward to hearing his insights this evening. Thank you so much for joining us, sir.
Thank you so much. And even though I'm going to talk, the slides are based on our experience with the Madhya Pradesh government. We would definitely bring in maybe the bit of Pondicherry experience in maybe our discussions, but I can keep it very short. Just wanted to introduce that this was like a team effort at CE. So it was anchored, the wetland conservation work. Madhya Pradesh government through GIZ had reached out to CE to develop this CEPA strategy, which is currently that way looked at for the Ramsar sites. And Madhya Pradesh happens to have more than 15,000 wetlands, but 5 of them are also Ramsar sites. And Madhya Pradesh was to also hold the international wetland event in Indore. So that's one of the maybe triggers to initiate this kind of CEPA strategy development in a participatory manner, which was anchored in the State Wetland Authority based out of Bhopal. EPCO is an organization which also contributes into this whole segment. And of course, I mean, the work was led by Satish, a colleague who handles the biodiversity conservation education group. Sanskriti, who's into the deliberative democracy space, I closely work with her on urban issues. Dr. Shweta Purohit handles our climate change unit. And of course, Navneet and Sarita been assisting also in the field work, at the same time documentation component. Briefly about CE, this was started as a Ministry Center for Excellence in 1984 under the leadership of the vision of Dr. Vikram Sarabhai, and It is based out of Ahmedabad, but with 20 people to about 220 people now. We also have moved into different thematic work. We do have our Bangalore office since 1992, working on different segments of work, but which is very region specific, predominantly into textbook writing and at the same time teacher trainings, interpretation centers, so on and so forth. But that's been active in Bangalore and Coimbatore on waste management thematic as well. But there are different thematics he works with. The crux of the matter for looking at this wetland or any citizen participation opportunity really is kind of here in Sherry Austin's ladder of participation. It's almost like 7 decades now. It's 1963, Sherry Austin's when she was looking at impact of different housing choices and projects, megacity projects, and then she developed this metrics that how do you really look at citizen engagement into any project or program, and her learning had been put here that most of the time when we want really participation or engagement with an issue or a problem, predominantly it depends on where you are located, but the desire is that it could be rather at least the point numbers 8, 7, or 6, where at least we want partnership, a delegated power, or at least citizen control, uh, where we could say that the citizens have, with fair deal of justice, equity, control over what's happening, the kind of decision taken, which may impact not only them but future generation as well. However, what we generally see in reality of governance that bottom one, two, or max three tokenism is generally being seen as in the name of participation, where a newspaper invitation for suggestion may itself be considered as participation from depending on your location. And I think it's more challenging when it comes to complicated economy. Here, the challenges for us is to also look at how do we build in citizen control over a period of time. And in the context of citizen control, we typically looked at uh, Madhya Pradesh as an opportunity and wetland particularly because it turns out to be quite a very common but very challenging ecosystem to deal with, and that's why when this opportunity arises, I really wanted to look forward to talk to you, all of you, because on one hand, there are typically a lot of interesting knowledge gaps when it comes to the wetland ecosystem. I think I would rather say that it is most um, most challenging to deal with wetland, and most of our urbanization story is actually a story of encroachment on the wetlands, whether it's Chennai, whether it's Bangalore, whether it's Pune, or whether it's even Pondicherry or Mumbai. And Mumbai too, I mean, it's also encroachment on the sea for that matter, from a purely ecological point of view. But that's the way I think wetlands have been uh, on the receiving end of human development on one hand. It's also has a great deal of engagement when it comes to promoting communities' involvement. Policy implementation also has a great deal of connection with it because uh, there's also historic ecological. If you look at ecological history and colonial history, some of these dams were which were for partly agriculture, industrial purposes, also became gradually the natural human-made ecosystems, which are then currently would fall under the category of a wetland category defined by ministry or the atlas for wetland for that matter. And of course, there is aspect of CEPA is also to deal with encouraging the behavior change, also to look at specific species and threats to those species and mitigating some of those threats, and also encouraging a cultural of like not only economic but emotional conservation. What I mean by this is if you typically look at city identities, some of the city identities are completely linked with the water body in that particular city. If you look at Chhattisgarh for that matter, I mean, if you minus the wetlands of Chhattisgarh from the life of urban rural, rather rural Chhattisgarh, there's hardly much left in that. If you look at Rajasthan or even look at Madhya Pradesh for that matter, I think this whole traditional aspect has clearly identity, including Mysuru for that matter, even the canal systems has a great deal of engagement with the connection with the water body. I'll briefly touch upon this interesting part of Gurda Khedi, which is about 35 kilometers away from Indore city, and it's Yashwant Sagar Lake, and it has two interesting aspects. One first thing I want to tell you that ministry has come up with this wetland atlas, but our technological capacities are currently to capture only 2.5 hectares uh, uh, water bodies through the remote sensing systems, and that has been put together on the ministry website as wetland atlas. And of course, Ramsar sites, some of them which are strategically important or ecologically important, there are about 80 plus Ramsar sites currently. So this happens to be also Madhya Pradesh's Ramsar site in near Indore. And here, apart from water supply and fishing, what has emerged from last 2-3 decade is really the this kind of lily flower kind of plantation. And what typically it has done also to create a lot of tension between tourist and the area within the community, between the struggle between the fisher communities as well as people who are into cultivation of these kind of flowers, and also the photoculture, selfie culture, which is also encroaching onto the systems. And so quite an interesting stuff in the first location. uh, Task for CE was to look at 4 wetlands and demonstrate 4 different kind of approaches. So here it was community engagement, sustainable tourism. Other side, Bhoj wetland, it was more or less working with farmers. And in the Shivpuri, where the water body is in the protected area in the tiger reserve of Madhavpur, uh, Madhav National Park, not Madhavpur, Madhav National Park, but the water body's pollution is coming through the Shivpuri city, which is untreated sewage. So we'll be briefly talking about what was the approach taken up here by to deal with CEPA strategy. Of course, stakeholder mapping was the framework to look at and to have initial discussion with the in charge members and active citizens who are putting litigations to understand their perspective, which is more or less in Bhopal and the capital city in that case. So, in this context, there was high interest and high influence, like the district wetland committees have been formed, and the school are also part of this. There is also high influence by the low interest, the city planning in the context of these wetlands. Also looking at the SPA Bhopal meeting also partly revealed some of these interesting findings. There's also university there which has been also contributing through Department of Limnology and doing interesting studies about it. So they have a lot of knowledge there, but maybe their influence with the system or the decision maker is maybe very low. There's also high dependence for the low influence fisher communities and farmers. And of course, low interest, low influences partly remains within the tourist or even the urban community where the transactional value is currently on. But all of these stakeholder mapping and their in-depth interviews were initiated. Then approach was also to look at talking to each of these thematic site visits. So this is Shivpuri, where the dump site was also being visited along with participants, teacher. It's also fisher community ke saath mein we had try and figured out uh, what has been the trajectory and the timeline. At the same time, what's there, what kind of there in the 3 generation, what kind of fishes they had been eating in last 3 generation, what is increasing and what is reducing. In the Bhoj wetland, it was more complicated as well because the command and control area wise, there's a lot of agriculture happening in the catchment. And when we got into from all these wetlands, the first specific Gurda Khedi experience of participatory tourism planning, with the help of that architect in the team, we could really map currently where tourism is happening, where are the settlements, which kind of revenue boundaries they are coming in, and what could be the revenue sharing models, and what could be the carrying capacity calculations here. The carrying capacity calculations are also given in certain areas in let's say in the tiger reserve. So if you have a particular stretch, on this stretch how many vehicles you can allow, how many people you can allow, there is a logic given very clearly in the definition, and some of those logics were also kind of looked at here to develop this kind of possibilities, and also trying to bring in the gender equity point of view in this, that it is just not about becoming member but also giving certain revenue to people in a way, and women participants who are part of the SHG groups here. So that was like a struggle which also been communicated and documented through system. Uh, Also, we also looked at key if you don't have particular guidelines and you also have NGT orders. Now, in this typical case, what also happens is that in that particular segment, people start building something which is cheap, but then there's need of also guidelines associated with material, and I'm hopeful that the competition you have done, we'll also look at the material dimension as well. But at the same time, that's what we also done a typical calculation, because this the critical part if when you are working with government is to look at the district schedule of rate which is given by the PWD department, and then trying to integrate some of these materials in the district schedule of rate of the government so that our recommendation can become reality. The second option, where we have worked more in the command area of Bhoj wetland, was actually to look at a farmers collective, and a trichoderma lab was recommended to replace chemical input into agriculture because the runoff will anyway come into water, and the chemical composition of water is changing. It has impact on the fish, and therefore about a network of 1,000 farmers with Lutheran, an NGO based out of Bhopal. It was worked out, and a trichoderma lab was set up in a participatory way with the 4 days of training, hand-holding. And this is the algae, which is very could be done in a very in a simple setup. All you need is like a pantry-like structure. With about 3 lakh or 4 lakh rupees inputs, within 7 days the output starts coming out, and I think it has been quite tried and tested mechanism. So that was promoted in that particular segment. Now. After these two inputs, third critical thing was really there are on the record district wetland committees, which are was there on paper for sure. But how do you really take a conversation forward? Because maybe any district in the country, the district collector is part of approximately 220 to 260 committees. So it's next to impossible unless there is very strict, clear agenda which committee works with and goes for a decision to collector. Much not going to happen about it. So in one of the segments, we had this one simple, let's say, metrics where we had invited different department representatives and asked them that what is, if you look at Chupri as Sakshi Sagar as an example, then what all you are able to find in terms of pollution, encroachment, water supply related issues, sewage issue, whether you are looking at tourism, you are looking at maybe the, let's say, water and waste management, and they started putting in their observations of what is definitely happening to that particular water body. This was further converted into the discussion, and the person you see is Sanskriti and Satish there. And the big matrix here is basically listing down both on the X and Y axis name of departments, and we then said based on what is happening to the wetland, can you really say what you yourself can do in the grid, which is, let's say, coming from both X axis, Y axis. Let's say if you're from tourism department, what are the actions you are already taking or you want to take to change the situation, and which action you need to do, let's say, with the forest department. So on your axis of forest, can you add on this was what you expect from forest or revenue or any other department, so that this documentation is what we are able to take to the district collector. I think this has been one of the key learning for us, that uh, people will definitely look at their own mandates, but then we'll have to also force, and civil society has to really push this agenda so that we're able to bring them on the common grounds at some stage. These are brief learning. Overall, what I have to say to you is, yeah, all I have to say to any group interested in wetland is that, I mean, we are dealing with a complex ecosystem in one hand. We do have great deal of ecological functions and contributions of the wetland, and one can go with the very traditional 30-year-old logic of ecosystem payment for ecosystem services. But I think, or the environmental economics part, our experience in the field and learning so far had been that it's quite a challenging thing to do when you're trying to also put a value to natural ecosystems. And then the capital is moving so fast and it's so vast that that's the double-edged kind of sword on one hand. So I think you have to bring in the conservation value as the core of the principle of communication for change, and then see to it that what are the emotional possibilities available, and structured strategic intervention we could do, so that we appeal to the value for conservation as a core of it. Is the learning of all the process so far. I'll stop here and.
Dr. Avinash, I had, you were showing that lake with the lotus flowers. Today I just drove about 50 kilometers from Mysuru, and then actually I parked my vehicle and took the photo and video of a lake.
Mhm.
Similar, but it's just still not the flowers.
Okay.
Okay, but then it's full of not the weeds normally what we see, rather it was lotus. So, and you just showed it like, wonderful. That was my
Yes.
question, or not rather question. I just want to understand. See, now you are taking the education or awareness at various level, from the school children to the adults. Now, what are the challenges that you face when you are doing this?
Yeah. So, I mean, the real challenge is like everything, everywhere, but at same time is the challenge. I mean, it's a systems thinking challenge that intervention needs to happen at different levels, but they need to also happen at at one level, and we have limited bandwidth. Any civil society group or even government for that matter, because I mean, you would also have this experience that people has been uh, people has been having this challenge that if you go to government office, they say that people have to participate, government can't do it alone. If you go to people, then you say that government also has certain flaws and then they're not doing monitoring well. If you go to civil society, they have a different view. If you go to fishermen, they have different stories. So everybody has a piece of truth with them, and I think for me the CIPA strategy or any conversation of this type is really bringing multi-stakeholder dialogue together to also see what is non-negotiable here, and also try and take up issues of dissent or issues of challenges in a way which really brings in part the sustainability solution. But this needs a lot of data. This needs a lot of patience. This would also need a lot of buy-in from at least initial acceptance to engage with people and with their with accepting their claim partly over the wetland as a national resource, but at the same time a process which is well defined within different segments within the laws of, let's say, wetland do have wetland committees, and wetland rules are also being passed by the central government. So I think milking of, let's say, judicial system has given us enough, but there had been also a very supply side initiative, and therefore generation of demand, which maybe the kind of initiative we have taken up is the right thing to do, to also build in that relationship between the wetland. Our relationship with wetland has really gone when the tap water really came in. That's what Anupam Mishra ji would say, that the moment we had what direct dependence on water, it was common. It was commons. But when you have a supply now, then our vision is really little blur of what's happening to your water supply body, and you may just protect your water supply body, and then the rest of the things are really not really worried. People may not be very worried about. So that's the challenge we have. I feel the second challenge is also of the challenge of consistency and fractured mandate institutionally, and therefore citizen will have to be on their toes to really then distribute responsibilities within ourselves very strategically, so that we don't spread thin at the same time be effective. That's the second challenge I feel. What I mean is that some group will have to work with forest department, some will have to work with wetland related, some will have to work with the within their segment with the municipal body for that matter, so that the sewage treatment also happens. Our relationship with the fisher community also should not be as encroachers of the place, but accepting their customary rights. So it's a thing we'll have to really structurally look at well, but that remains the challenge. I hope that answers.
See, actually, even at the studio, we've been having a discussion, and we've tried to introduce the sensitivity, or rather create a sensitiveness towards water and the surrounding environment. But still, it's a very big challenge. As you said, it's the supply is what comes to everybody's mind.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, another thing is, many activities or initiation ends up more as an event, not as an awareness. So, how have you people addressed this? Because, every day that celebrations of wetland to water day to whatever. So then, we all become active on those days. And then, that's the end of the day also. So then, how have you all tried to address this?
Yeah, the can you just reframe the last point? Yeah, just
No, I said the celebration of event full days just gets restricted into wetland day or water day and things like that. Okay. So now when you have tried to incorporate it into your curriculum, it could be, or initiation and all those things. So how do you make sure that continuity is established?
Yeah. I mean, the 2 3 level of challenge, I would say. One challenge is really, on one hand, understanding the wetland and its natural function, and which is beyond the anthropocentric kind of, or even water supply function. And therefore, the question also remains that, whether it's irrigation department or water supply department or even groundwater department, whether aquifers are also looked at into that, because there's first level challenge is also the policy challenge, which is basically, most of our Indian water policy being surface runoff management policy than having detailed understanding of groundwater and aquifers. And therefore, it's an entire communication strategy of looking at the kind of stakeholder map I was trying to show on who is highest influence maybe in that particular wetland, in terms of policy or a department, and under whose control that wetland is, where the supply chain is under which department, in terms of regulation. So it's a graded kind of response of communication to different agencies on one hand, and to create a very critical mass which is able to also then take the responsibilities. That's the second level of challenge. One such way, the low touch activity had been what we are trying in Pondicherry, one school, one pond kind of an area, or even in Pune, with Jivit Nadi. The idea is that you adapt a particular stretch of a water, let's say river, and really do the cleanup activity there. But is to establish a relationship, because I think in urban context, what also happens in the name of safety, you also stop access of children to the water body, which I also understand in terms of as a concern. At the same time, the more it becomes wilder kind of an area, it also becomes a dump site for waste or construction demolition waste. So how do you also keep a balance between these two remains a question, and therefore, to deal with that challenge, we have to go maybe with a clear strategy of trade-off on one hand, but at the same time, possibility of starting with protecting the most, let's say, the live stream kind of an areas, or aquifers, uh, live aquifers on one hand, but also making sure that the sewage treatment is also done. So I mean, it has to be done partly on this line, but at the same time, second thing which we had tried out in this context is also try to get a randomly selected citizen jury in presence of expertise. So the idea here is that you try and bring in the kind of city profile which you have, or a area or a region profile, with not more than the range of 30 to 50 people together, uh, with clear gender balance or also disability representation, to have a very inclusive kind of group, try and pull them into that room for a day, or maybe if the discussion is higher, maybe over 2 months, two meetings of such individuals who are lay citizens, who could get an inputs from expert on this, let's say, of limnology, or whichever segment we are trying to give, design or even the landscape. But they are not the one who are going to lead it. They are going to give the information to people to make decisions, and you really do the facilitated process to get inputs from citizens, even get the recommendation, uh, suggestions to them, and they let them take that decision. Now that gives us a set of good recommendations to put with administrations and others, saying that we are not just interested lobby group which is working with you. Of course, you have to do it under Environment Protection Act, but at the same time, here are lay citizens expecting this. Otherwise, I think getting a mandate from citizens become a challenge, and it is not possible to bring all the citizens together in one room, even you go by a decentralized model. So the challenge and solution partly we see in this, that there is a bit for a school to even generate certain evidences. There is a bit for school college students to use their projects more meaningfully and contribute to that, like you're doing in your competition here. But repository of that knowledge, not only in our tacit knowledge, but also to keep on with the help of media is other, so that we are able to establish the institutional memory as a group as well as civil society. So it's going to be anchored through like this kind of a strategy is what the hope is.
Good evening, sir. Myself, Chinmay. I am from Mysuru School of Architecture.
Hi, Chinmay.
The question is like how to make sure that the water body does not stink over the period of time.
I mean, it's a system, right? I mean, it's a clear system of input, output flows, and one has to maintain that flow. And then it really depends as a whole system that why this particular challenge is coming. It's just not about challenge of input and then whether how the filtration kind of happens. It might have already reached level of its carrying capacity of really organic matter. There are technical solutions to that, and there are also there are solutions in terms of design solutions with that. But I would definitely say that this thinking happens, which is like water when it's stagnated. It's been it will have a challenge. But at the same time, you have to look at the inlets. You have to look at the outlets. I'll also look at the water testing to be done in a very structured manner. And if already reports are available with the State Pollution Control Board or even corporations, depending on which area they are, I think there are some very specific answers could be found. But dealing with them with phytoremedy or dealing with them with the particular treatments still possible. But I think depends really unless we are measuring it, unless we measure it, we are not able to manage it. So that remains a challenge. I mean, the basic ecological thing, which is one has to do it, what kind of material is getting there, and then how we make a outlet or treatment to that material will answer that part. We need to really onboard the sewage department of city or water supply department of the city on board, because they do have to do mandatory reporting to the pollution control board of water body.
Yeah.
Avinash, a great presentation. Really appreciate the kind of an effort that your organization is doing. I wanted to also know, when you are doing these kind of projects, the funding, how does the funding sustain over time? Because these projects do not just finish in months or days. So the funding, is it sustained by the state government or central government or any funding agencies as such?
See, I mean, state government through GIZ had supported this initiative, but I generally feel that there is still a great deal of interest in the corporate under their that schedule for CSR support for the environmental conservation part, and I think water still remains a very important area of work. So it's from the government side. I think depending on the city administration, do have certain untied grant coming from 16th Finance Commission also for specific projects. So from the government side, typically they would have consultants on board, but I think we can use the CEPA strategy as a mandate to them, and you could take the responsibility and lead to develop that kind of proposal along with forest department or along with the urban local body, depending on how the stream is currently flowing. At the same time, I definitely see on certain patches, like you have in the zoo, there is a scheme for adopting an animal. So like similarly, one can also look at a particular patch and to be adopted. But I would say uh, till we are able to or you are able to identify specific area of intervention, engagement of a low touch activity is most critical, and I think CIPA strategy helps doing that. And once we are crystal clear with the expertise and our experience that what needs to be done, I think fund flows can come from both government, private, or even semi-private kind of support possibilities.
Okay, adding on to that, just as a continuation, when you involve the locals on board for these kind of projects, do they come in voluntarily, or do they also expect something as a reward or something like that, or is it truly love towards the water body? Have you faced any of such situations?
I mean, the what we are worried about as an organization really is that whose livelihood is really dependent on that water body. And I think more than love, it's also the transition value between that ecological production of what their dependency is, including let's say Dhobi Ghat for that matter, like fisher the washer community or fishing
Yeah.
community, the customary rights. So I mean, observing that and actually accepting their claim and
Okay.
starting the conversation from there, saying that key it's
Okay.
way for making it better, because their experience had been very traumatizing, because
Okay.
we also become kind of environment, they are declared as environmental terrorists who are
Uh-huh.
encroaching onto the land, but I mean they are the ones there from centuries as well. So
Yes.
as urban citizens or urbanists, we should also understand that they had a very definitely had a kind of a good relationship with the space,
Yeah.
and usage of it. Of course, I also understand that the practices have also gone wrong in terms of from Fitkiri to maybe Surf Excel or that's changed. But I think there are alternatives which could be discussed. I mean, but if it's come that it is non-negotiable that no displacement of your livelihood would happen, but if it continue like this, displacement from the state is likely to happen. Pollution Control Board can also serve you on notice. And they will likely to not to serve it to the big companies, but to the people they can control. I mean, that's reality. When one knows about it, how governmentality functions is known to us. So we should make that big pitch to them, and I think surely they'll take their own time. Currently, we are also working in Trombay Kolivada in Mumbai, and I think it took us about 3 months to even start the conversation. There was Tata Institute of Social Science, which is also important for compensation building. It takes time because their experience had been also very may not be very encouraging as well. So one has to really go with the site for that matter.
So it's a long process.
Yeah, it's a long process. But I mean, when they test you, see, we go with our agenda. Community is there with their agenda. And till we agree on certain agenda points, therefore, I feel that at least some processes, and they test you of your agenda. And once they believe that there is no harm, they'll definitely come on board and also take it forward, because our livelihood may not be directly dependent on that water body or the health of that water body. Theirs is, and therefore their stakes are more important in this sense.
Yes,
they are just facilitating the process.
Great. Thank you, Avinash.
Avinash, now that you were talking about it, another question has come up in my chat. Okay, so they want to know, one, we are talking about so many lakes and the water bodies. Some are in the rural, some are semi-urban, and some are urban areas.
Yes.
So now, what should be the strategies when you are looking at all these things? One is, the development is the most of the people who would want to look into, especially the urban water bodies. That's where the most of the challenge comes. So in your experience, how have you dealt with these kind of things?
So, I mean, that's still a big challenge. See, the challenge is that first part is really that we need to really locate the State Wetland Authority and the NGT cases associated with the wetlands, and really make the case to the State Wetland Authority, saying that this is what the water body we would like to engage in conservation. Do you have the wetland management plan with you? Do you have, what is your thinking about it? At least have you put it on paper, or just is it on paper? They may have their own funds to get it for the wetland improvement through Environment Department or through Pollution Control Board or through this environmental governance segment, or even state government may fund them with the Ministry Lake Improvement Project also, the central government funding it. But I think most of this also goes into infrastructure creation. That's our experience. And beautification becomes such a scary word, because they may do beautification in the name of conservation, which may be counterproductive. And therefore, going with that kind of information and also alternate plans, and to have a deliberation with them and engaging them sustained way in this communication process is a great thing. Like, invite the wetland authority representative in such workshops for that matter, or even face-to-face workshop for that matter. That's a good to have a foot in the door and to also understand. You'll definitely find well-meaning people within those systems, and then gradually move forward and do it. That's one part I would definitely say. And then MLA fund, MP fund is also done for particular infrastructure project, and then it's a double-headed sword again. But therefore, one has to also be part of those decision-making representation. For example, when we did the Pune City bicycle plan, we had a 3-member citizen committee on the bicycle plan, which is mandated through law to implement in Pune over next 20 years. Just to also make sure that there is consistency in what you're trying to develop, and we are able to then control that partly. At least make a noise about it, how much we are able to push it. But institutionalizing also our participation with well-meaning structured way should be inbuilt when we are recommending it. But I would say it's a very site-specific thing, and it's also state-specific thing. And I'm definitely more hopeful from Karnataka, because I think whatever little experience I have in Karnataka is that the decision-making cadre is full of IFS background people, and they do have maybe orientation of the forestry, which also has the wetland. And therefore, when a city administrator, even an IS officer comes in, they may have very little orientation towards ecological complexities. They may be good managers and they are there for take decisions, but the more and more water bodies are coming into urban area, we are engulfing them from rural to urban. But then there is no expertise at engineering department. They may have engineers, but they may not have ecology people with them, and that gap should be filled in by in institutions like you for sure. I
Actually, we have done a extensive study of Mysore stormwater drainage. Okay,
Yeah.
so whatever you were talking about, we faced all the problems, and
That's
we really did almost what do you say, the model also, physical model, so that the ward engineers can come and understand what we are trying to talk and things like that. For them, it is just RCC drain, not a stormwater drain. That is where the problem comes. Yeah.
so some of these things I feel that we have to really go from top. So go and meet then secretary, urban secretary, environment, because see the openness for newer ideas and such level of understanding is at the top level, and maybe having some letter, having some support, their visit may help in getting more local buy-in, because see the policy dialogue doesn't work with the street bureaucracy. A
Right.
circular works for them and a call from higher authority works for them.
Yes.
Works with them in our experience also. So let's see how
Yes.
it
Yeah.
is.
Sir, I'm a student of urban design at SPA Bhopal, and a lot of my questions were already discussed in the last two queries that you have solved. So, relating to that, when we talk about stakeholders around the water bodies or specifically within the wetland regions, so in your experience in the projects you have done so far, were there any significant development control changes made other than the buffers? Because when we talk about wetland management or water body preservation, the similar solution that we see in master plans is just a simple buffer that is not even as per NGT, it is barely 50 or 100 in most of the cases.
Yeah.
So, were there any cases where they changed the development controls for the settlements around these water bodies?
I mean, that's been quite conflicting. I'll take example of Pune. So when we have metro coming in, and metro more than mobility, it was a real estate project. So
Okay.
500 meters on along the corridor of metro is given for FSI.
Yes, sir.
And however, river regulatory zone is basically 500 meters from the high flood line. So,
Yes.
and there's clear conflict of both ways. Both are correct, but at the same time, we know what results likely to come. So, definitely, then you'll try and shift the flood line and do a manipulation that you take a flood line from both ends of
Yeah.
river in order to just justify the kind of infrastructure you want to. Non-polluting industries should not be there in that zone, kind of thing. But I think the other challenge is also if it's a structured body which is created, let's say by Britisher like Pashan in for water supply for Governor Bungalow is a different ball game, because then it's very fixed. But when it is like a canal, it's then more complicated, because then the industrial areas maybe now maybe already part of it, and your land use initially, which is not under the urban or UDPFI or URPDFI guidelines now, may not be covered in that. So I think we'll have to really make cases based on evidences, like Chitra ma'am, Champa ma'am had been saying. How do we then also bring in this whole important knowledge of what is there for conservation and what need of
Yes.
conservation, and push it, and so that we can invoke some of the provisions in the Environment Protection Act or Water Protection Act, so that it becomes at least important, or refer to NGT cases. So definitely having some advocates on board is a good thing to do. With
So, because when you're saying Pashan and the peri-urban areas, it's easier to make the changes there and maintain that buffer. But when we talk about core of the cities where you already have built up till the edge of the river or the water body, so like you're saying, it overlaps with the buffer overlaps with the TOD guidelines. So, is there any ground level suggestions, guidelines to at least leave the stilts open for the river to flood or floodable landscapes to be created?
So one such experiment in Pune had been to really engage like experts from the Jivit Nadi Ecological Society, CE, and several others who had really worked together with corporation to also have a non-negotiable kind of guidelines. Now that was one part. But also sewage department has coming up key when the redevelopment is happening. More than 150 tenements household will have to have their sewage functional sewage treatment plants, which will
Okay.
be certified annually. So that's one DC rule kind of change
Mm-hmm.
is there. Now it's there on paper for sure, but then I think we need also strong civil society to also make sure that you're uh, able to really make it happen, and also build capacity of the junior engineer to monitor that.
Yes, sir.
In order to, because land value capture is done by builders, and you and me will invest into that particular project for sake of definitely our household, or our home. But then the risk is being transferred now to us or the tenants, in this case, and the land value capture will go with the developer. So that accountability has to be fixed in by invoking, maybe even looking at some of the provisions within the disaster management rule.
Okay, correct, sir. Yes. And sir, when you're talking about these buffers and livelihoods within it, like in the case of Mumbai, so were there any examples of any spatial safety measures or any allocation of activity land or some zone given to these existing livelihoods? Because fisheries and uh, Dhobi Ghats, okay, some of these occupations might be invasive, but what about agriculture and many of the cases like cattle grazing in the riparians? So, what about these kind of occupation? Are they given some space?
I mean, two example broadly come in. One was the East Kolkata wetland example, in which the
Okay.
berries were and it's also Ramsar site, by the way. But
Yes.
there, the whole idea was to have the claim through a society of fisher community, so that
Okay.
it's a fishery department, the society of the fisher communities, and their right, which actually gave a pathway to mapping and trying to keep a buffer zone through a commons process. So
Okay.
mapping, trying to get it acknowledged as a commons, and
Yes.
claiming that commons through a society. This method of working with the communities to do it is possible. Of course, it's time taking, but then one has to also bring in the unionization process in it. But I think for the value of commons, and then also flexible land use in that case.
Yes. Yes, sir.
And then both will have to work in Kolivada, Lalita Kamath has also have a paper. If you can look at common her paper, and Gopal, I guess, Dr. Gopal, both of them had been
Okay.
working in Kolivada. It's been 5-6 years now, but there's also, they started mapping the commons used by Koli community, both in terms of market and at which are then gradually getting encroached by the mangroves. And then how do you then find alternatives to that? So some of these land use plans superimposed onto this flexible zoning for that matter, but
Yes,
getting
sir.
it acknowledged as commons is critical, I feel, in that case, even though it's called it buffer, because we anyway do it in reality as a practice. But
Yes, sir.
trying to really push it through some system or mechanism is a good thing to do. I mean,
Thank
we
you,
do
sir.
claim our spaces when there is festivity, and
Yes, yes.
then we go back to giving it to the cars. A similar thing I would say for water body, for sure. It's a
Okay, sir.
continuous
Thank you so much.
negotiation. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah,
Oh, that was wonderful. So
yeah.
much information. Evening. One
Absolutely.
last,
Yes.
we've been
Thanks.
talking about policy and all those things. Yeah, as all of us are aware, NGT, they themselves have reduced the buffers for
Yeah.
all water bodies. So now we make the policies to break it. So where do we look at, or whom do we, question?
Yeah.
Maybe
So,
monkey bath is where we all have to go, and then.
yeah. I don't know. First of all, it's see. I mean, the subsidiarity principle is what civil society should always keep in mind, because long-term decisions will also subject to dynamics between the state and central government. So you'll always be looked at through bias. However, having said that, I mean, one common thing I have seen in the judiciary responses so far for any opposition may be, let's say, protection of the monuments, A-grade monuments as a heritage under Heritage Conservation Act to even let's say Mangrove conservation, is that it is a public project and therefore it has to be done, kind of thing, both in terms of roads and also in case of water. I think we'll have to change our strategy and brainstorm around this, that keeping the water channel open for in future waterway is maybe another way argument we should really do. And in order to maintain that kind of natural flow is for the economic development, or we'll have to figure out a very strategic ways to really deal with it, so that our intention may not be to do that economic development mindlessly, but core of it is a ecological value, and maybe language of it has to be such that it can't be politically ridiculed, and it really cracks the political economy model, is what I feel. But it's very gridded and loaded process, and it can turn around, and it's a challenging thing, I would say. But we'll have to be very strategic about it, is what I have to say. That's all I have to say at this time.
I know it's a big responsibility on each one of us. Hope we all succeed, and we should not give up hope. On that note, thank you so much, Dr. Avinash Madhale. It was wonderful. And, Raghunath sir, when he spoke about in his talk, in his webinar, he said SEPA, and then he said Avinash, he took your name. And then really, we've learned so much from you also, because every day you are on to it. Okay, so we are there maybe once in a while or in a different perspective, but the ground reality, you know it more than any one of us. Yes, so thank you so much for such interesting and informative dialogue, rather. Okay,
Sure.
thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Yes,
Thank you.
Trivikram also has joined. Yes, he is IUDI Karnataka chapter chairman. Yes, and they have
Thank you so
been
much.
very good collaborators with us for even in all the initiatives, I could say it. And on that note, yes, thanks to each
Thank
and
you.
every participant, students, and the Design Challenge team members too, for joining us for Avinash's talk today. And we do definitely will continue the conversation. So on behalf of all the organizing centers, that is Mysore School of Architecture, Mysuru Water Forum, and Aranya Outreach, and the knowledge partners, Council of Architecture, IUDI Karnataka chapter, and Mysore School of Design. Thanks to one and all.
Thank you. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you, sir.
Looking
Thank you.
forward.